I always hate to break up good conversation. Sorry, I know that it's loud, but if I'm not loud, then it doesn't go all the way back there. Thank you all for engaging with this in such a lively way. It's good to hear. I know, as I said when I began, that this might not exactly have been what you were expecting this morning, and that's okay. But what I do want us to do is to take just a moment before Drew Gulick, who is the other co-chair of this planning and visioning group, has some things to say. I want us to take just a moment to read all of these together, just out loud, as a way of helping us to emphasize them and to begin the process of ingraining them. So let's begin with outreach. St. Peter's is a wellspring of hope. We inspire one another to transform St. Louis and beyond in the name of Christ. And then community. St. Peter's is an unexpected oasis for all. We are a loving, diverse community with a shared calling. And worship. St. Peter's offers expansive worship experiences beyond Sunday that are tailored to engage people where they are.
Thank you, David. Hopefully this morning you've had a chance to kind of better understand these three visions that our group has come up with. And I wanted to take just a second to talk a little bit more about the process by which we've come up with these, because I think there are some important things that I want to make sure everybody kind of takes away from today. And I think it'll also be really helpful as I talk about kind of what comes next for us. So folks might remember, kind of starting before the summer when we began the listening sessions, that we're assembling down here and we were collecting feedback from the congregation about on a number of different topics. We talked about our past, and we built this wall that's up here kind of looking at where St. Peter's has come from in our history. We talked about the present and explored kind of what's working today, and also maybe some of the things that we would like to see changed. And then finally talked about the future. And I want folks to know that not only were those discussions and the feedback that we received from those discussions incredibly helpful and formative as we created these three visions. And I hope that you see a lot of what was discussed at your tables as you were able to attend those listening sessions reflected in these three statements. But also I wanted to say that it doesn't stop there. That information that we collected at those sessions will continue to be carried forward as we assemble the three committees to focus on each of these areas. Speaking of those committees, we've also been today kind of taking notes at the tables, and hopefully with the cards that you have in front of you, you've taken some time to indicate, here's areas that I'm interested in. So you'll notice on one side it's asking for your name and your contact information. You certainly don't have to, but if this is something that's inspiring to you that you would like to be involved in, we're hoping that you'll fill that out and indicate if there's one or perhaps more than one area that's interesting to you, so that we can then assign the right people to the right committees and continue to engage with the congregation at large as we carry this work forward. But also on the other side, we're asking for your specific thoughts on each of these three visions. And that information, again, will continue to be really helpful. So we're kind of, now that we've collected the information from the listening sessions about kind of your thoughts on St. Peter's past, present, and future, now that we've assembled these three visions, we want to hear, so what are your thoughts about those visions and how we're going to carry those forward? So speaking of how we're going to carry those forward, I think that Jeannie and David have already mentioned, but we're going to be bringing together committees, and these three committees, one will be dedicated to each of these three areas. And so I'm going to, in just a second, kind of announce who's going to be co-chairing these. I'm really excited about the folks that we've got to co-chair these groups. We've got a really great group of leaders assembled together to focus on this. But we're going to continue to engage with everybody. So that's why we're asking if you're interested in participating going forward. And so these groups that I'll announce in a second, why don't I announce the leaders and then we'll kind of talk about what's next. So on the community, I believe community's first side, we've got Lori Haffenreffer and Dee Dee Nolker. Yeah, round of applause, right? I know that some of them weren't able to come. So I should probably say that we just reached out to all of these co-chairs. David did the outreach in the last week, so I know that a number of them are not able to attend today, and it was tough on kind of late minute notice for them. So Lori and Dee Dee, and then I believe next is worship. Yep. So we've got Carrie Burrows and Paige Ivy. I think Paige is definitely here today. And then lastly, on outreach, we have, drum roll, Chris Knight and Jen Schaefer. So these 6 folks are going to be focused on the 3 respective areas that we've mentioned. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of crossover between them, right? And so I know that these groups are going to be working closely with one another and with Vestry. Vestry is going to make sure that there are people who are sitting on Vestry that are participating in these working groups as well. And so really kind of what their goal is to assemble all of this information, all of this feedback that I've been mentioning, come together and say, okay, how do we make a concrete plan or plans, it's probably going to be a multi-pronged approach, to try to fulfill this vision so that in a few years we can say that was an accurate description of St. Peter's from an outreach perspective, from community, from worship. We've built towards that. That's what each of these groups is going to do. Now, certainly there's a lot of work that goes into doing this. And so we were thinking about what's the right timing to really kick this process off. And so we decided that we would ask this process, the leaders of these processes to start in January. And so I just wanted to say a word about that because I can imagine folks saying, well, wait a second, what are we going to lose momentum? Why do we have that time to give? The thinking there, I think really 2 key things. First is we know that, as we go into the holiday season, it gets more and more difficult, both with demands on our time, but also with our ability to schedule things. And so trying to assemble these groups and then get these groups to start meeting right as we start to go into holiday season is probably going to be fairly challenging. But then the second is that we know that we will have a new cohort of people entering the vestry at the beginning of the year. And as I said, that vestry engagement and involvement is really important to these groups. And so we figured it would make a lot more sense to have them started as we bring in the new vestry cohort. So that's probably all I had to say today. I know that we've got a few moments. If folks have questions, I'm definitely happy to take some. Oh, and we've got a microphone, so if you wouldn't mind waiting for the microphone.
So one of the things I was thinking in order to not lose momentum is now that we've all worked from home or done Zoom meetings from work, maybe some of the groundwork can be started through Zoom meetings and getting that, so it's not as inconvenient. You don't have to meet in a place. You can just get online, and if you can make the meeting, you can. If you can't, you can't. But I think that would be a great way to kind of just soften the startup for January and keep that momentum going.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I will say that it's something that I've seen used by the planning committee that Jeannie and I have led, where we've tried to find a good balance between meeting in person, where I think that there's something lost when you meet by Zoom or by phone, but at the same time, it is a really good way to make sure that things move forward. And so I'll probably defer to those 6 co-chairs to see how they want to approach that. I think I saw another question. Yeah, go ahead.
Can we, it's a suggestion, can we really develop a communication ongoing plan? So to really let people know what's going on in each of the 3 areas and maybe a lot of visible here, but not just by technology, but some mail, other, calling people. I think we need to think of a way of being very inclusive. And I really do think people need to be asked. It's great on the piece of paper, but if I got a phone call and said, hey, will you join me in this outreach or this community or the worship, I think it'll make a huge difference, and maybe this is the time to do some of that.
That's a great point, and I think what we've been trying to do with communicating the work that's been done thus far is to find opportunity in the weekly emails, in the Undercroft, during service. We've sent out letters. We've tried that multi-pronged approach because we know that there's no one perfect way to reach everybody. But yes, we will definitely. Yeah, we will definitely continue to think about that and carry it forward. Thank you.
I was just going to say, can you come clean out my email box before you start sending those? I get so many emails. I get a lot.
So we've been including them in the weekly emails. We haven't sent additional, I don't think.
No. I'm not
Okay.
talking about those. I'm just talking about they get so lost within all of the other emails that you get. I mean, I don't even check my emails most of the time unless I know somebody's sending something. So I'll keep my emails.
So you're a here on Sunday person. Great. Any other questions, comments? I mean, Jeannie had to go up for the service, so any really tough questions, I would ask you to save them for when Jeannie's done, and then ask her after the 10:30. Oh, I think we have one more.
Well, I think this is just really enforcing what Dudley was saying is maybe there'd be a way to just have a slip of paper that goes into the, maybe separate, but fits into the bulletin once a month or something, or once every 6 weeks, that is an update on what's happening in each of the 3 areas.
That's a great idea, and probably really good for soliciting, if people want to be involved, and then also communicating the progress that's being made. I think that's a great idea. So I'll tell Jeannie about that. All right, can I ask David? Oh, was there one more? No? All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a couple of things, and then we can disperse. One is I just want to, just as a little bit of a follow-up to some of the comments that you've made, just want to remind you that the Center for Healthy Churches that we've worked with, Bill Wilson, who's been our consultant, will continue to be involved in this process. And fortunately, we don't have to invent the wheel. And so there's a very somewhat scripted way that they've seen that this works well and has worked well and effectively in many other churches. And so all along the way of how we will communicate this and continue to want to have everybody engaged, they will be helping us to think through that and what will work best in our context. I want to also we will keep these in front of all of us so that they can continue to be top of mind. I hope that you'll take some time and just read through them. There's some very intentional, very powerful language in each of these, even though they're not very lengthy, which is again intentional. But when you talk about transforming St. Louis, becoming an unexpected oasis for all. This is language that came out of the input that we received from many of you all. And especially when you're talking about engaging people where they are. All of that language is very intentional. All of it is extremely relevant to what we're experiencing today inside and outside of the church. And so I think that these 3 proposals, these 3 statements will help us to continue to move into a very positive direction in a way that we can have an impact not only internally but also externally. Thank you all again so much for being here. I want to put in one plug. I didn't see many empty plates this morning. Just want to remind you that this happens every Sunday morning. There's always a great breakfast here, and so I encourage you just as a way of being together and experiencing more community. And thank you to those who've prepared it and have cleaned the tables. Let us go forth in the name of Christ.